everyone, and welcome back. I'm the Storytelling Advisor, your guide as we analyze all types of stories in books, TV shows, video games, and movies. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the stories we discuss here because I don't know about all of you, but I'm having an absolute blast talking about this stuff. Stories rule, and it's always fun to dissect the best ones. Today, we're talking about a horror movie that seemingly reinvented, or maybe invented, or at least popularized, the found footage style of filmmaking. Though critics enjoyed the movie, audiences were pretty polarized, which I understand and we'll talk about for sure. But, despite this, I think there are some neat pieces to the storytelling that stood out. So grab your Dramamine pill, turn off all the lights in the house, and get ready to get scared as we jump into the Blair Witch Project. So, as per usual, a bit of background before we jump into it. It all started in 1993 when film students Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez decided to make a horror film that captured the creepy realism of paranormal documentaries. They wrote some lore using reference to Edward Kelly and Rasputin, took some notes from The Crucible and the Salem witch trials, and were influenced by movies like Jaws, Alien, and The Shining. What came out of it was the Blair Witch, the ghost of Ellie Kedward, a woman banished from the township of Blair in 1785 because she was accused of practicing witchcraft. Here's where the story gets kind of fuzzy, which I'm going to talk about later, but essentially, Ellie's ghost continued to haunt the woods and kill people, mostly kids, throughout the centuries. This fake folklore tale was used to support the found footage of 3 students who had gone missing while filming a documentary on the Blair Witch. The production team sent the 3 actors, Heather Donahue, Mike Williams, and Josh Leonard, into the woods to film for 8 days, terrorized them the entire time, spliced the footage together to form a narrative, and the rest is history. Let's start off by talking about something that worked so well in this movie that it reignited an entire style of filmmaking and storytelling, presenting the story as found footage. I think we all know it pretty well at this point, but back in the 1990s, no one had ever really seen or heard of it in the horror genre. Now, I'm going to die on this hill because using the technique to tell the story of the Blair Witch Project was a stroke of genius for several reasons. First off, it created a lot of conversation about whether or not the story was true, which is possibly the best thing you could hope for when making a horror movie. The unknown is the scariest part of fear, and boy oh boy did the production team lean into it for the film. The marketing quickly became intertwined with the story as the 3 lead actors were prohibited from taking on other projects or speaking to people about the film. The filmmakers actually took it a step further by designing and distributing missing persons posters for the 3 leads, having them listed as presumed dead on their respective IMDb pages, and creating fake newscasts and interviews that were uploaded to the film's website. I know by today's perspective that doesn't sound very convincing, but let's remember that this came out in 1999, a time when we weren't immediately sleuthing out answers from the internet. I mean, just imagine it. You're about to watch the first screening at the Sundance Film Festival. Someone hands you a flyer that says the 3 people in the movie are still missing, and then you're told it's a real documentary about their last moments alive, and there's no frame of reference from other movies like this. You're already feeling motion sickness from the bouncing camera, and the growing pit of despair in your stomach is getting worse and worse with each terrifying scene. All of these unsettling elements added up to an amazing way to tell a horror story. It was an immersive experience that constantly had you questioning what was real. And the best part of all, the truly scary parts were left entirely to your imagination. Which brings me to my next point on what worked well in the Blair Witch Project. Now, there are times when showing the monster in a scary movie can increase the horror, like Samara crawling out of the well in The Ring, a zombie horde lumbering down the street, Michael Myers chasing Laurie Strode through a house. It can be a very effective tool for storytelling, but, and I can't stress this enough, not showing the monster is sometimes key to keeping the story together. The Blair Witch Project is one of those cases. Never showing us the witch made our imaginations run wild. Coupled with the very realistic premise of getting lost in the woods, the story blended a paranormal fear with the instinctual terror that comes with survival. People get lost in the woods all the time, and it's completely plausible that they could die from exposure or hunger. There have been cases where amateur hikers have perished mere miles from a trail just because they didn't have the skill and knowledge to fend off the forest. The Blair Witch Project played into this so well, only giving us hints throughout the story that something paranormal was afoot. With no sighting of the witch, the tension was constant and unrelenting and perfectly captured the terror of the three students, creating a very cohesive structure with the plot and thrills. They threw in pieces like Josh going missing, something shaking their tent at night, and the creepy stick people to keep us on the verge of believing in the paranormal. But it never quite crossed that threshold, which was a really smart way to tell a ghost story. Alright, let's talk about the ending, which was one of my favorite parts of the movie, but also where I had most of my complaints. It was very subtly scary, with the final moments being Heather's point of view as she runs screaming into the basement of the abandoned house. She finds Mike facing the wall, a callback to earlier interviews that detailed how Rustin Parr, a serial killer from the 1940s, made children face away while he murdered one of their companions. Such a cool, creepy way to end the movie, but, oh my goodness, did they goof up the execution of that storyline. The groundwork for the lore wasn't clear from the first act, with pieces of the Blair Witch's origin told through interviews before we get into the woods. But her methods and motives were still too ambiguous by the ending. Though lots of footage was shot to clear up the witch's tale, it wasn't shown in the movie, leaving tons of plot holes in its wake. I think this is where a lot of people watching had problems with the movie too. We're told that Rustin Parr was the one who made kids face away, not the witch. So how could we make this connection during the climactic scene? The whole ending hinges on remembering the fact that if you see someone facing away, you're probably going to die, but the explanation was glossed over at the beginning. It resulted in an ending that doesn't have as big a punch as it could have. The production team was already asking the audience a lot by using this style of filmmaking, so I think having a simpler plot would have gone a long way in making the story easily digestible. Even one line from an interviewee saying something like, Rustin Parr kept saying a witch made him kill all those kids, would have connected the plot lines and made it easier to reference at the end. I know the filmmakers made another short movie prior to the film's release called The Curse of the Blair Witch that had the backstory and exposition, but since it was only available on cable, most people had to rely on the feature film for the story. The production team made the decision to focus on Heather, Mike, and Josh in the woods instead of including these foundational story elements, which was definitely a mistake. And there were other pieces of the story that could have been removed or shortened, like the whole plot line of the map. It was established that the map was useless from the get-go, so we didn't need so much time dedicated to losing it and arguing over Heather as a guide. This whole space could have been used for the backstory to smooth out the witch's character arc instead. Then there are other plot points that weren't explained, like Heather supposedly stealing something from the witch, a scene that we don't actually see in the final cut of the film, but I guess caused all the trouble in the first place? It's just one line that's easily missed, but it changes the entire story. Now we're left wondering about the witch's motivation. Is she retrieving her property? Is she upset there are intruders in her land? Or is this just a random stalking and killing? Any of these options is fine, but just pick a lane, especially when using such a complex way of presenting a story. If you're going to introduce a new style of storytelling, keep the premise and arc simple. Unique, fun, and interesting, but simple. Well, those are my thoughts on the Blair Witch Project, a story I know everyone still cares about and discusses. I'm kidding, but there have been a lot of sequels and spin-offs even to this day, so this was definitely a successful premise. I do think it's neat how urban legends are created now that the internet is around, and how the stories travel across a digital world. Creatures like Momo and the Slender Man, who evolved on social media and web forums, are a testament to the continued desire for folklore, and the Blair Witch Project was pretty pivotal in launching that world. So, even if you feel the need to scoff at the shaky camera and snotty close-ups, remember that this story played a huge role in shaping the horror genre and keeping audiences afraid. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to comment your thoughts, like, subscribe, and let me know which stories you'd like me to analyze in the future. See you next time. Bye!